Night Court ASMR. Hello, darling, and welcome to the Night Court. As always, it's your choice, and tonight, you have chosen Whispers from Plato. I'm going to educate you a little bit about what I know on how Stoicism was born and Plato's influence on it. A lot of people have asked on the channel to talk about some of Plato's philosophies and a little bit about his life. I do want to mention up front that I think it's important to remember cultural context, and if there were some beliefs that Plato had or espoused that don't sit right with you today, I know that's the case for me in some instances. I hope that it doesn't mean that you're no longer interested in learning broadly about the origins of Stoicism. So just want to kind of give that small caveat, not to excuse any thoughts, but just to recognize that there can always or frequently still be utility in the thoughts of someone, even if we didn't 100% align with them or see all of their worldview as being the same as ours. So just want to give that general statement. I'm going to move a little bit closer to you. I've got this standing desk and I'm just trying to get used to all the free range of motion that I now have. So let's get cozy, and whether or not you have any interest in listening to what I'm going to say, that's fine. Just please enjoy, if you can, the tone of my voice and my whispers. And lie back, unclench your jaw, make sure your back is supported, rest your legs if you can, and come down this road with me. I love to talk about Stoicism, and now we're going to learn a little bit more about its origins. So, let me get started. I do have some notes here. I hope that's okay. So, this is appropriate, I think, for the Court of Dawn. So, let's start at the beginning. Welcome. Welcome to my fellow traveler of thought, seeker of silence. Tonight, we are going to follow the quiet trail of a great inheritance. From Plato all the way to the Stoics. You know, like I mentioned before, the Stoics already, if you listen to my channel. Marcus Aurelius, with his calm strength, the former emperor. Epictetus, the slave-turned sage. And Seneca, the silver-tongued statesman. But they were not born for nothing. They were shaped by those who came before and behind them. Plato, behind them, stands in the soft twilight. And so tonight you'll hear his voice, not loudly, but just in echoes and in whispers, and in the silent structure of Stoic thought. So we're going to begin in a grove of olive trees. So we will talk about it as the Grove of Akademia as we kind of go through the different stages here. So let's place ourselves in the Grove of Akademia. The year is 380 BCE, and a breeze stirs the trees. Cicadas sing softly in the stillness. You walk past figures in white robes and stone benches. You arrive at Plato, disciple of Socrates, founder of the Akademia, first true school of philosophy. Here, philosophy is not memorized, it is lived, it is questioned, it is breathed. Plato does not demand belief, he demands clarity. He asks, what is justice? What is the soul? And what is the good in that shaded garden where we all are now, darling? In this garden, the seeds of Stoicism are quietly planted. The philosopher's mission. Okay, Plato believed the soul is drawn toward truth, as a sunflower turns toward the sun. But the world is full of shadows, and so his mission was to help the soul see clearly. Plato taught that the visible world is an illusion, just a reflection, a flicker on the wall of a cave, if you're at all familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave. And beyond it is the realm of forms, eternal truths, the perfect good, and the unchanging just as in justice. The Stoics later would reject the idea of a separate world of forms, but they would keep Plato's purpose, right? So he didn't create a perfect template or insist that, I don't believe the Stoics in any case insisted on fully following all of Plato's ideas, but in that you can see again that the Stoics kept Plato's purpose, so to guide the soul toward wisdom and to live in alignment with truth. And we're talking just conceptually here. I don't want to get too intense while you're trying to fall asleep. But the idea that it's not about external truth, but internal order, responsibility to oneself, like Plato. So those seeds of thought were shared. And the Stoics believed that, as we've all heard this phrase before, the unexamined life is not worth living. In Plato's mind, everything we see is an echo. Okay, so there is not a tree, but tree-ness. Not a beautiful thing, but beauty itself. So in the world of forms, there is this idea, the form being the real actual thing, and then below that, this sort of quality of that actual thing, right? Not a tree, but a tree-ness. He called these pure, eternal patterns. He called them forms. To know the forms was to know reality, not the copies. It's a really high-level concept, but he's saying to know the originals, right? Now, the Stoics do disagree with this metaphysics. They did not need another world to explain this one, so they differ in that sense. The Stoics sought reason in nature itself. The form was not outside the cosmos. It was the cosmos. But the discipline of seeking truth behind appearance, that they inherited from Plato, if that makes sense. It's tricky. Okay, so kind of the next thing I'll touch on is this idea of the soul as a charioteer. A charioteer. So Plato imagined the soul as a chariot, right, that was pulled by two horses. One noble and disciplined, and the other wild and impulsive. The charioteer. Our reason must guide both. This image burned itself into Western thought broadly, and the Stoics remembered it well. They believed in training the passions, right? Sort of harnessing anger, fear, lust, not by force, but by reason and by understanding. Both Plato and the Stoics believed that the highest part of the soul is the rational mind, so they have that in common. And the task of the rational mind is to govern wisely, govern the passions. Okay, so the next concept is, we can call it reason as divine. Okay, so for Plato, reason wasn't merely human, it was divine. He spoke of a cosmic order. So the idea that there is an intelligence that structured everything, the soul of the universe, okay, whereas the Stoics later would call this logos. Sometimes Plato might have called it God. So logos. And what logos is a rational fire that, to be metaphorical, that governs all things. God, nature, reason, all the same, all under that umbrella. To live well was to live according to this logos. And so Stoicism inherited more than an idea. It inherited a vision. This idea that the universe, it was not chaos, is not chaos, but clarity. Okay, so now let's talk about Plato's influence on Zeno. Zeno of Citium, who is acknowledged by most to be the founder of Stoicism. He did not begin in the Stoa. He began with Plato. After losing everything he owned, all of his assets, everything, in a shipwreck, he wandered into a bookstore, is how the story goes. And there he read about Socrates, and he was transfixed. He sought out philosophers and studied under the successors of Plato. So he studied under the Akademia, and that shaped his early thought. So although he would eventually diverge from that, he never lost that structure. The reverence for reason, which is really a through line in Stoicism. Also the passion for virtue. Zeno's Stoicism wasn't a rebellion from his teachers, but instead a refinement. And it never moved so far afield in essence, if that makes sense. Okay, so kind of moving on. Let's talk about what these terms mean: the good, the true, and the virtuous. So Plato believed that the highest good was beyond pleasure and beyond wealth, beyond power. It was found in his conception in harmony, in the soul, rightly ordered. Now the Stoics agreed here. Virtue was the only good, not health, not fame, not fortune. Only the wise use of reason. Only a life in alignment with nature. Plato called this eudaimonia, and I hope I'm saying it correctly because I've only, I think, read the word eudaimonia, and that means a flourishing soul. The Stoics called that more or less same thing, virtue, but they meant the same thing. That's a soul in peace with itself. Everything in alignment. Okay, so cosmic order is the next idea we'll talk about. in his dialogue called Timaeus, Plato talks about the cosmos as a living being with a body, a soul. In it moves with purpose. It breathes with harmony. Now the Stoics took that vision and made it their foundation, really, because they did believe that the universe was a single organism that was rational, a rational whole. Fire, breath, and reason kind of intertwined. Fate, the idea of fate, it was not cruel to the Stoics. It was wise. This idea that what happens, happens as it must, right? Not this notion. This is hard to extricate, but we talk a lot about, well, just colloquially, I think people nowadays talk about fate as being this like predestiny, or things were fated to happen. I think that was a little bit looser for the Stoics. It's more about accepting what does happen. So that doesn't remove your ability to impact change, but there is an extent to which we have to accept, and it's better that we accept the things that happen than buck against them. So yeah, I'm going off on a tangent here, but talking about fate, things happen as they must, right? So there's this great quote from one of the Stoics, and I know I've mentioned it here before, but I'm paraphrasing, but the idea is that if you let things happen as they will and you're pleased about them happening as they will, that's better than fighting against the way that they're going to happen. So in any case, what happens, happens as it must. So the Stoic trains their mind to flow with it. Okay, so as Plato once said, the measure of a man is what he does with power. And the Stoics might add to that, or with fate. Okay, so the dialectic bridge. Now Plato taught dialectic, which you might have heard of before. What that really means is the art of questioning, of peeling back assumptions in order to find truths. Socrates had shown him the way there. And so then Plato passes this on. He passed it on to the Stoics. And they believed in that method. They taught logic as the skeleton of philosophy, which is why so much of their principles are actionable. Without reason, there is no virtue, no wisdom, no peace. From Plato's Dialectic, the Stoics' logic grew from there, and then they made it sharper, more analytical, but it was born in the same cradle. Okay, reincarnation versus present control is another area we should talk about. So Plato believed the soul itself was eternal, okay? That it lived many lives, learning each time, and then forgetting, and then returning, right? Many of us have heard of the concept of reincarnation. But the Stoics did not share this particular vision. They, however, placed their focus on the now, right? Not the past life, and not the next, on the now, only the present. So while Plato's soul, his idea of a soul, traveled the heavens, the Stoics' soul stood still, calm, resolved, and rooted in the moment. Still, it's worth mentioning because both did believe the soul was precious and that reason was its flame. Okay, so the Academy and the Stoa. We'll talk about that. The Academy, a garden of thought. The Stoa, a painted porch. pieces with the same purpose. Both sought to teach, to shape minds, and to calm chaos with reason. In the Academy associated with Plato, questions echoed. In the Stoa, answers were whispered. But both knew that philosophy was not a subject. It was a way of life, a structure for understanding life. Okay, and now I will bring up Plato's politics a little bit. So Plato dreamed of a philosopher king, right? A ruler guided by wisdom. A just society shaped from above. Whereas the Stoics were more humble, you could say, more private, internal. And they believed in mastering oneself, that was the highest calling, not governing others. The idea of mastering oneself would kind of lead to all that peace. They did, the two of them, well, Plato and the Stoics still shared Plato's ideals, though, of justice, temperance, courage, and wisdom. Whether in a city or in the soul, right? Those are the pillars of a good life to both parties. Pythagorean echoes. You might have heard of Pythagoras. I'll bring this up real quick. Can't not mention Pythagoras. Plato was drawn to him, the mystic of number and harmony. He believed actually that the universe essentially was music, and that the soul, I'm using a metaphor, but that the soul was tuned like a string, okay? And the Stoics, they also believed in harmony and alignment, right? And in balance between self and nature. And that lines up with Pythagoras. So both schools heard the same music, just played in different keys, you could say. The order of the cosmos was not just math, although that's relevant because it has to do with balance and repeated patterns, but also it was meaning. So let's arrive now at the edge of dawn in our meditation on Plato. Come back with me to where we started. You've walked through the olive grove, through reason, virtue, and fire. You've heard Plato's voice, not in commands, but in currents, in the gentle guidance that he gave to those who would become Stoics. Zeno, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, and centuries later, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Rufus Musonius, Epictetus, all our guys. Centuries later, the whisper continues, and Plato's shadow falls across the Stoa, not as an overlord, but as a light behind the flame. I think that's much more gentle representation. Tonight, we've touched that light, and now you may rest. Sleep, sleep, my philosophers. You